It's undoubtable that SpaceX has become a powerhouse over the past 10 years when it comes down to space exploration. Their continuous collaboration with NASA, as well as the sheer level of innovation that the company brought to the table, are only some of its most important achievements. However, SpaceX's magnum opus is undoubtedly going to be the upcoming colonization of Mars. Elon Musk has set an imperative for developing proper techniques and technologies for conquering Mars, which is said to happen soon. However, before it is conquered, SpaceX will first have to properly land on the planet itself. To see what it will take to put our feet on the red planet's surface, join us as we take a look at how SpaceX will actually land on Mars. Before anything else is discussed, we first must talk about what SpaceX plans to use as their primary vessel for conquering Mars. The choice falls, rather obviously, on the venerable Starship, which will be the cornerstone of most of SpaceX's future ventures. However, what needs to be mentioned is that the Starship that will be used on such a mission will be completely different to the one that is currently being tested out. How, you might ask? Well, the vessel will most likely be converted to use different fuel to what it uses now. At the current, the SpaceX Starship's Raptor engines burn liquid methane and liquid oxygen, and while both are quite serviceable currently, methane and oxygen aren't exactly plentiful in space, and they will be rather hard to come by. That's why SpaceX will have to adapt or replace these engines with ones that use much more widely available fuel in space. The search led SpaceX to hydrogen, which is the most abundant element in the universe and, of course, in space. However, even with that in mind, Mars is 140 million miles away from Earth, which makes reaching it quite a challenge, whether SpaceX will be using hydrogen or not. So how will SpaceX reach Mars? Before we can even think of reaching the red planet, SpaceX and NASA will first need to create a proper infrastructure for it. And by infrastructure, we mean that there will need to be a trial of refueling stations and fuel depots that will be scattered between Earth and Mars. These fuel depots will be made from various other starships that will be specifically converted to serve as refueling stations for reaching Mars. Furthermore, the moon itself will also be explored by then, and it will most likely serve as the major stop to Mars, especially since the moon base is also planned to be one of the first hydrogen fuel production plants in space. Once these refueling stations are established, SpaceX will be able to create a very reliable way of reaching Mars using spacecrafts, allowing ships to go both ways without fear of running out of fuel. When it comes to the length of the journey to Mars, it is estimated that going from Earth to the red planet will take somewhere between 80 and 150 days, depending on how advanced the ships become. Finally, once the ship reaches the surface of the planet, the last and the most complicated and dangerous part of reaching Mars will set in, and that is landing on the surface. You see, landing on Mars will represent the most problematic part because there is a whole heap of factors and problems that need to be pre-planned, as many things can go bad. Just look at the Odysseus moon lander, which toppled despite the moon being quite a tame environment. Imagine how problematic landing on the surface of a planet that is ridden with storms and winds will be. That's why SpaceX is developing specific entry, descent, and landing gear that will allow the Starship to land on its surface. This includes parachutes that, combined with retro propulsion, will provide a cushioned touchdown on the Martian surface. Furthermore, the Starship will also use aerodynamic drag to its advantage to make the landing even softer. This will all be done to mitigate the damage done to the ship, seeing how it will need to return to Earth once the venture is complete. Not just that, but the Starships of the future will be reusable, which is why SpaceX will focus on creating a ship that will survive the landing with ease. Speaking of the ship, the Starship will also need to be reinforced for the harsh environments that Mars has to offer, and it will provide shelter for humans in all kinds of ways. You see, the starship should be able to withstand extreme temperatures combined with a thin atmosphere, which in turn results in extremely high levels of radiation. As a result, numerous life support systems as well as radiation shielding will need to be developed to ensure safe exploration of the planet. Speaking of exploration, what is next? Once the starship successfully lands on the planet, the astronauts will start exploring the surface and conducting various scientific experiments which will allow them to draw conclusions about the planet. Most of these will be directly pointed at the geological and climate research that will allow us to explore the possibilities of inhabiting Mars as well as what it takes to do so. Furthermore, they will also search for past life on the planet, as well as the possibility of present life, seeing how there are still pockets of water ice on the planet to this day. Finally, one of the staples of this research will undoubtedly be the establishment of the Mars colony. Now sure, this won't happen the first time SpaceX reaches the surface. However, once we've started exploring the planet, there is no going back. When it comes down to the colony itself, SpaceX plans on creating an enclosed space that will have Earth-like temperatures initially and will shelter humans from Martian environments. Think more or less of constructions that are similar to Doomsday Bunker. They will eventually expand and interconnect, and in the future these objects will be so grand and interconnected that they will represent an entire settlement. However, you won't be at fault for thinking that this seems rather ambitious. Too ambitious, in fact, to be real, which is why we must ask, when will this happen? Well, believe it or not, SpaceX projects that Mars will be partially colonized by 2050. This partial colonization means that SpaceX will bring various machines to the Red Planet that will serve as a remote basis for exploring and even exploiting the planet's resources. However, humans are still years away from living on Mars. In fact, Elon Musk stated that he'll be long dead before Mars will be colonized, as it'll take at least 50 to 100 years until humans can reliably and safely inhabit the planet. That said, you should definitely expect that a few starships will reach Mars by 2050, and they will carry the robots and the machinery that will be needed for exploring and exploiting the planet. But despite the human colonization being so far away, 50 to 100 years is still pretty good news. In fact, it's great news because we're only a century away from fulfilling a dream that has been ever present for hundreds and maybe even thousands of years, and that is finally reaching and conquering the skies, which, honestly, ain't half bad. It seems that the Red Frontier isn't as far as we initially thought it would be.